So a nightly rules update from Games Workshop today, and here's the too long didn't read. Dear loyal customers who own a Cerastus or a Castus Knight, get wrecked, yours sincerely, Games Workshop. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking about a nightly rules update that leaves rather a lot to be desired for the Forge World Knights. As seems to be the pattern with the Codex updates these days, the Codex comes out, and then a week or so later they update the Forge World Imperial Armor Compendium to try and make the units work with the FAQs and things so they're at least functional in the army, even if they're not very strong. Certainly sometimes they make a little bit more effort than others, but it seems with this nightly update, the effort has been absolutely minimal, and missed at least one rather important keyword update that I thought that they would do at an absolute bare minimum. As it goes, I think that the new Knight Codexes are fairly good on the whole. They're certainly not massive meta-stomping monstrosities like the Tyranids Codex or Harlequins, but solid boosts to the army, and you can layer really quite a lot of special rules on the few walkers that you have, and actually add in a fair bit of synergy between big knights and war dogs or armigers. With knights though, there's as many Forge World datasheets as there are Codex ones. Forge World produce really quite a lot of resin knights, and a new Codex certainly gives a chance of some of them being a bit more relevant again, if some of them synergize quite well with new rules in the Codex. In general, the Forge World pattern knights cost a lot, and the people who own them will want to play them, at least on some sort of comparability with the Codex ones, even if they're not the most optimal thing. With the update, there were really quite a lot of issues that the knights had that they could have addressed, some to make them functional, and then some to make them interesting. For starters, the Forge World knightly stats just generally aren't all that great. Most of the Cerastus and Acastus class knights just weren't really played anyway, maybe the only exceptions being the Questa Megaera and Styrex. The 4+ invul save and general purpose weapons made them interesting picks, as was the Armiger Moirax. Lightning Locks are fairly efficient anti-horde, particularly for loyalists, and the datasheet is just a lot more flexible than most of the other Armiger ones, only really rivaled by the new Chaos Wardog Stalkers. Otherwise, they needed to gain some abilities, Chivalric Code and Harbingers of Dread, and each of the individual knightly classes are lacking keywords to interact with the stratagems and options in the book. For the Chaos sides, the Moiraxes were lacking the Wardog keyword, the Questoris variants were lacking the Abhorrent keyword, and the Cerastus and Acastus knights were essentially locked out of the vast majority of options in the entire codex. No favours of the gods, no exalted court, most relics and stratagems can't be used on them. Otherwise, there's a few weird datasheet discrepancies, such as Titanic feet working completely differently, and the movement characteristics of the Forge World Knights all being slightly better. I guess those two are at least a small point in the Forge World Knights' favour until they got addressed. Finally, for the Loyalist Knights, the Forge World Knights lacking any sort of bondsman abilities really puts them at another disadvantage compared with the Questoris ones. Again, locks them out of a bunch of synergies, and means that if you're running Armigers alongside the big knights, things that can't hand out the -1 damage just aren't quite as tempting. Unfortunately, as I've already mentioned, what they've chosen to do is about the most minimum that they could do, and they missed one of the most important of those changes. There's only really 3 areas of update. They've added in the overarching faction abilities to the Knight datasheet, things like Harbingers of Dread and Code Chivalric that don't technically apply to any models without the word on the datasheet. A few really obvious wording changes, such as the household to noble household for the Imperial Knights, deleted a bit of redundant Dreadblade wording, and changed Vehicle Squadron to Armiger Squadron, just to keep all the rules for the baby knights unified. They did also update the Armiger class keyword to Wardog for the Moiraxes, so it is good that they can officially get synergies like Favour of the Gods and the various buffing options from within the Codex, though Armiger Moiraxes are maybe a little bit more overshadowed on the Chaos side than for the Loyalists. The Wardog Brigand with its Melter and Chain Cannon is really quite a nice general purpose firing platform, and I think a lot of people will prefer that to the Lightning Lock or Volkite setup. It just seems more value overall, particularly when you take into account the Heavy Stubber or Havoc launcher. Otherwise, that's literally it. Everything else is being passed over. I'd say probably the single biggest error out of this is not to update the Questoris class keyword to Abhorrent on the Questor Megaera or Questor Styrex. To me that feels like it was just an error of proofreading from Games Workshop, as those two can make use of the Loyalist synergies for Questoris models, but can't use all the Abhorrent synergies for the Chaos ones, meaning that they're weirdly better in one codex than the other until they fix it. My guess is that they probably will fix this, and sooner rather than later. As soon as the majority of Chaos Knight players who own those models see the rules, I'm sure they'll message the design team on their feedback email. It just seems pretty lazy that this one was missed, seeing as they have had a fair amount of time since the codex came out for feedback, and this is supposed to be the update that fixes keyword discrepancies like that. Otherwise, it's certainly sad times for the Cerastus and Acastus classes. From my point of view, I just don't really see why it would have been all that overpowered to give the Cerastus access to the Questoris options, and the Acastus classes access to options like their Dominus Knights. Maybe there might be some strong combos in that, but that's not the end of the world. I still feel that most people are probably going to be wanting to use the Codex variants anyway, just because their weapon stats tended to be slightly better already, and the weapons at least have generally got buffs going into this new codex. It just feels like they're really not putting any effort in to make them somewhat viable compared with the codex options. It doesn't make much sense to me why the Cerastus and Acastus Knights would have even less synergism options usable compared with the Dominus or Tyrant Knights in the codex. Otherwise, there don't seem to have been any nerfs to the Titanic feet or movement characteristics, which weirdly means that the Forge World Knights stomp a bit harder and move a bit faster. Whether or not people choose to use the new updated Titanic feet profile sort of doesn't matter too much on a lot of them though. Pretty much all of the Cerastus and Questor Forge World Knights all have a bit better melee from their actual melee weapon, so will rarely or never be wanting to attack with their Titanic feet. I guess it's okay for the Acastus though. I guess it does mean that the Cerastus has a little bit more of a niche as a very fast moving big knight, I suppose. I guess 14-inch move on the Lancer is at least a little bit more than the others. 2-inch more than a Gallant, and 4-inch more than most Questoris. Otherwise, none of them get any Bondsman abilities. Again, I thought it might have been a fun touch to allow, say, the Questoris and Cerastus to be able to give Armigers a Bondsman ability, even if they didn't have any intrinsic buff on their datasheet. Just being able to hand out the -1 damage could have been nice. That would have made them feel just a little bit less like dead weight from a buffing point of view. There's no stat line updates or buffs to their weapons. I guess that's not really expected, as these Forge World FAQs don't tend to be balance updates in any way. Still though, in the context of the rules not really working for them, it's not so great. And perhaps to cap it off, if you did want to be super pedantic with the keywords, technically the Imperial Knight keywords still don't quite work due to an errant hyphen, and if you wanted to rules lawyer to the nth degree, then technically Armiger class without a hyphen isn't the same keyword as Armiger class with a hyphen. So the most pedantic people around could technically say that some of your stratagems and options don't work on the Moira axis, and technically they'd be right. In reality though, the intention seems absolutely crystal clear there. I don't think any reasonable opponent or tournament organiser would ever rule against that. So anyway, I think that's overall pretty bad news for the Forge World Knights. Just seems like a pretty lazy update to be honest, missing an important keyword for the Chaos ones, and not fancying the effort of cloning across a couple of rules like Bondsman abilities, or thinking about balancing Cerastus and Acastus with the new options. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say though. If you can see more positives in this than me, then I'm certainly happy to hear them. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas down in the comments. If you want to keep up with Games Workshop's rule changes and releases, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new 40k stuff just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. You can find that down in the video description, and it is what allows me to make so many Warhammer videos quite so regularly. If you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel supporters do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next in the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.